Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Run and Become events. We've been delighted over the last year to move to virtual online events. And we've been able over the last year to access quite a large audience and share inspiration about running in all its different forms with so many people around the world. So again, we're delighted to have another event here. And a lot of you are joining in, so we'll have a nice crowd again tonight. So just a big thanks to Run and Become for joining us and supporting us over the last year. And hopefully you get a lot of inspiration from our speakers tonight. And now I'll hand you over to Adrian, who is our host for the evening. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sir David. I'm Sir Davis down in London at our London store. I'm up here in Edinburgh. So we've got quite a global audience, and looking at all the signups, we have got people from all over the country, from right up in the north of Scotland, right down to London and Cardiff and down in the southwest as well. So it's a really national audience. And looking at the chat room, which we'd encourage you to use throughout the evening, it looks like you're all doing a variety of events over the summer, from total beginners to doing 100 milers. So there's a whole spread of people doing lots of different things. Very grateful for the support from Las Fortiva for this evening's meeting. Las Fortiva, as a lot of you know, are one of the leaders in outdoor footwear, clothing, all sorts of things adventurous and inspirational. And we have two of their supported runners here tonight, as well as John Samways, their UK sales director, who's also an ultra runner himself. So amongst all the speakers, we just want to share all their passion and their love for just running and getting onto the trails. So just briefly, I'm going to introduce all the three speakers. We're going to start off in a minute with Rachel. Just say hello, Rachel. Rachel's up here in Edinburgh. And we have Kim, who's in the Lake District. Is Kim there, visible? Hello. We can hear Kim. Okay, great. And we have John Samways, who's down in the home countries, in the flat home countries.
Hello.
Mr. Las Fortiva himself. So we're going to start off with Rachel. And Rachel is an old friend of Run and Become, is an old friend of Las Fortiva as well. And she's going to talk for a little bit about how she got into trail running. And then as we move along, we'll offer some of her top tips for trail running. So Rachel, just tell us how you got into running at a younger age, and as you got older, how your running developed.
Yeah, so I first started running when I moved to London after university. It was the first time I'd been living in a big city and working in an office. I felt kind of constrained by that, so I started running just around the streets and then around the parks in London. And kind of what I really enjoyed was running on the parks and like the small trails in the parks in London. And then started signing up for a few trail races. I found some trail races just down in Surrey that I get to the train to after work that were organised by a running club in Surrey, the South London Harriers. And I think there weren't many women running in these races. So I did okay at them, got a phone call from the organiser who asked me to come and join the running club for the cross country season. So then I kind of discovered cross country, which was just running around a muddy field or a bit of the South Downs in the mud. And it made me feel like being a kid again and, you know, running in the mud. Had a team of people to support me and I could support afterwards. So that was pretty great fun. And then I moved further north in London. I ended up running with London Heathside in North London and kind of running around Hampstead Heath and like Parkland Walk between Highgate and Finsbury Park, and just did most of my running on the trails there. And then 5 years ago, moved up to Scotland, where a friend introduced me to hill running, which was very different from the hills I'd been running up in London. And I realized that actually it's okay to walk up hills, because the hills we have in Scotland are only hills you can kind of run up. I think before I always thought it was, you know, a failure if you're walking up the hills, and then I realized that no one was really running up the hills, so that was fine. So that was kind of a big shift in my thinking. And sort of through hill running and joining a club up in Edinburgh, so I run with Carnethy Hill Running Club. We call them hills rather than fells for some reason in Scotland, but I mean hill running, fell running, yes, it's the same sort of thing. I then sort of discovered long distance trails and ran the Tour de Mont Blanc, the UTMB route with a friend, Lindsay. She's actually on this call, over a couple of days one summer, and we planned this multi-day trip, and we planned it so we weren't running very far each day. We were kind of seeing the same people each evening that were walking it, but we'd run it and get there really early and kind of have an evening to recover, and then run again the next day. And that was great fun. And then we discovered that there are these national trails and sort of marked trails all over the country and all over the world. So we ran the West Highland Way together over 4 days. And I think we ran the Speyside Way, and one in Ireland, the Wicklow Way, just over a couple of days. Not doing sort of too big distances, but just really kind of using it as a way to have an adventure and to get out on the trails. And then I remember the first, when we ran the West Highland Way the first time, we ran it over 4 days. And the second day along Loch Lomond, it just rained all day. It was horrible, horrible weather. We thought, this is awful. You know, this is, I don't understand how people can run this sort of thing in a day, or sort of knowing that there are ultra marathons on the West Highland Way. We're never going to do anything like that. And then sort of fell into running ultra marathons by accident almost. I ran around the Isle of Wight with a couple of friends when I was still living in London, just as a charity challenge, and we mainly walked it, and it was kind of good fun. I ran with some friends, and afterwards I found that I recovered quite quickly, and I quite enjoyed it, and I was quite good at just keeping going. But I kind of put that aside, and then I ran an ultramarathon in Cornwall because some friends were coming over from Germany, and they said, "Oh, we're coming to the UK. We're going to do this race. Come and join us." So I said, "Okay, great." It turned out to be 44 miles down in Cornwall, on the southwest coastal path. And again, it was great fun and kind of fine. And then I entered the Highland Fling, which is the first half of the West Highland Way, after saying I couldn't imagine doing that sort of thing, because I heard that it was a ballot, so I thought I probably wouldn't get in. It turns out that there aren't, like, it's a ballot, but it's not that oversubscribed. So I got a place, and that was, yeah, my first Highland Fling.
For anyone who doesn't know the Highland Fling race, that's a 54-mile race on the lowlands of Scotland from Glasgow up into the central Highlands. Yes, everyone in Scotland will be familiar with it, but there are people in London who might think, "Gosh, what's the Highland Fling?" But it flatters to deceive. It starts off very easy and sort of winds up as you go along the course, doesn't it, Rachel? Yeah. Yeah,
and it's really well marked, so it's a really good trail to just go and run. And the race was lovely. The first time I did the race, I didn't know anyone. I couldn't work out how to get to the race. I didn't have a car or anything, so I ended up finding an Airbnb 5 miles from the start, and I cycled from there to the start of the race, which was fine. But then after the race, I got the bus back and I had to get back on the bike to cycle home after 53 miles, and that was quite tiring. And I kind of told some people about that afterwards when I met some more people, and everyone was really surprised that I hadn't just messaged on Facebook. But I didn't know anyone at the time and didn't really have any idea what I was doing. But that's kind of, I guess, then when I ran the race again the next year, I gave a couple of people a lift, and I always felt a lot more kind of involved with the race, because I realized that the trail running community is super welcoming and friendly, and that's one of the things that's kind of kept me coming back and doing more.
Right. And there's several people on this call who were just starting their trail running journey, as you did a few years ago. For someone who's just done a few races on the roads and is finding the trails, how do you find, what was the great attraction if you were running on the trails as opposed to running on tarmac?
I think for me, it just feels more like an adventure. Kind of, you'll sort of find, even if you're following a marked path, you're much less likely to see anyone. And it kind of feels like you can be alone in nature. You can kind of get off the beaten track and get to see some amazing places. And I really like the idea of kind of doing any sort of journey and running from place to place, or, I mean, also doing a loop, actually. I don't really mind, just kind of finding an interesting trail to run and exploring it.
Yeah. And obviously you've talked about building up your distances to doing things like 50 miles quite competently. Over about how many years has that been happening? Yes, you didn't just wake up and say, I'm going to do a 50 mile. It was sort of a bit of a progression over how long? 2 years, 3 years?
Yeah, I did my first Highland Fling, my first 50 mile in 2017. So I ran a couple of ultramarathons the year before that, kind of shorter ones. So yeah, over a couple of years. And still, so in 2019, I ran my longest race so far, which was 120 kilometers in the Dolomites, which was very hard. And I struggled a lot it took 17 hours. So for the last 10 of those hours, I found it very difficult. And thought, well, I'm not going to run any more long races again. Probably I should just stick to the 50 mile races. So this summer I'm running the Lakeland 100.
Okay. So in terms of if someone on this call who's perhaps been doing half marathons or marathons, they're thinking of moving up to a 50 miler, what is the biggest change in their training you think they should do?
I think the first time I ran a 50 miler, I didn't really know what I was doing and just kind of trained as if I was training for a marathon. So I do kind of a long run at the weekend, and then my weekly mileage would probably around 50 miles or something. And then the big change between the first year and the second year, and I did struggle a bit towards the end of the race in the first year, which wasn't really to do with lack of training. It was more to do with not knowing that I needed to eat food and not go out too fast, that kind of thing. But the big change for me between the 2 years was doing back-to-back long runs, so like a long run on Saturday and then another long run on the Sunday, and just kind of getting my legs used to running long distances and running long distances when tired.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as you progressed from your first fling to your second fling, did you have any changes in your training? Like, do you work with a coach, or have you had any proper coaching, or do you just tend to be picked it all up as you go along, as it were? Yeah.
I started working with a technique coach in Edinburgh just before my first fling, in fact. And so I worked with him quite a lot between the two Highland flings, which I kind of always had a bit of a niggling knee issue, and before I would run longer races, like even marathons, and kind of get tired towards the end, and just my form would kind of slump. So I spent a lot of time working with a technique coach to improve my running form, and a lot of things like strengthening my core so that I could run stronger at the end of the race. And he did a lot of work with my training and kind of helped me do, like I said, for the first one, it was very much, well, I've run marathons before, so I just kind of do the same sort of training, but on the trails. Whereas for the second one, it was a lot more structured.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And would you say that's down to sort of just having a bit more structure to your training? You're being a bit humble here, but I know you improved your time quite considerably from the first fling to the second fling, in fact, you actually won it the second time you did it.
That was a surprise to me, though. Yeah, I think it was a lot, not just with the training, a lot about the race management, and kind of having the experience of having run a long race before and knowing that it was going to get hard and that I needed to kind of start eating early on. So I had a much better nutrition strategy. A friend said to me, you should eat every 45 minutes. So after the first hour, then every 45 minutes from that. And I did that religiously in my second Highland Fling, and it worked so well. Whereas the first one, I didn't eat enough or early enough, and really struggled towards the end of the race. And I think that's a bit of a shift. I think when you start running longer races, and maybe you're running on this trails, you're not running as fast as you might for a road marathon. And so actually you can kind of take the time to eat on the uphills and drink and, look after yourself a bit better.
So it was a sort of steep learning curve, but the difference between, say, doing a half marathon or even a 20 miler on the trails and going to like a 50 miler, is there much difference in your nutrition strategy for that and what you have to take on board? Is there more eating involved the longer you go? I
would definitely try and kind of keep eating consistently throughout the day, like however long the day is. I'm pretty bad on short races, especially if it's hot, because I'll forget. And I say short races, also sort of just long runs in the hills. Even I'll go out for maybe 20 miles and I'll realize after 2 hours I haven't eaten anything. So I really try and force myself to do that. But yeah, I think my strategy tends to be sort of eat little and often, so, and try and get into a habit of doing it from early on and keep doing it.
And obviously you've done a few events abroad now. The one in the Dolomites was the longest to date. Yeah. How do you find running on the continent compared with running events in the UK? There's several people on the call who've got events on the continent lined up, and I'm not sure they've done them before, but there's a different vibe to some of the continental races to UK races. Yeah.
I mainly remember the start line being really scary. So I did Lavaredo and I did Transvolcania both in 2019. And just really remember there being really busy start lines and lots of kind of really tall people with their poles sticking out of their packs. And I'm not that tall. So kind of being packed in a pen with lots of people at the start with kind of poles sticking at you. I remember being really scary, which kind of made me more nervous. But I mean, actually running the race, I mean, they tend to have lots of, like certainly the mountain races that I did were, you know, lots of people out on the course supporting, aid stations super well stocked and kind of a real party atmosphere, which is, if you do a race like the Highland Fling, there's that, or Lakeland or something, I think we do have that in the UK, but certainly the races I did abroad in 2019 were very big races. So they felt like a huge kind of spectacle.
Yeah, and obviously you've stressed the whole camaraderie of trail running. Do you feel there's more of a camaraderie in trail running than on the sort of road running scene?
Because I came to it through cross country, and that's definitely kind of there's a lot of camaraderie there, like you are on a team. But I think, I guess when you're running on the road, you're much more likely to be looking at your watch and trying to run a set time and pace because you know how far you can run over 10 kilometers or whatever. Whereas on the trails, you're likely to be jumping over streams and things and going up and down hills and hopping over bits and going through gates. And so it's kind of less about the time and it's more about kind of running to feel. And so I think you naturally probably slow down a bit, and certainly in the longer races, it seems to be like a nice chat. You know, you meet lots of people along the way and chat with them, and that's good.
Yeah. How do you reconcile when you're running a race and having that camaraderie and also trying to be competitive? Is it a juxtaposition, or how do you bring out the competitive in yourself when you're in an event?
I mean, it's been a long time since I've raced, but I don't know. I think, I mean, certainly, so for example, the Highland Fling in 2018, I ran a bit of it with my friend Nicola, who ended up being 4 minutes behind me. So super close. We'd done a lot of training together. We had a great section running together. And then we got to an aid station, just kind of split up, and it was just, you know, we were having a nice chat, but we were both obviously aware that we were in a race. So it didn't seem to be there was any kind of conflict or anything there.
Yeah. Okay. In your training generally, because a lot of people, when they get longer, even going from half marathon to full marathon, think it's all about mileage. Do you still incorporate any speed work as you've gone longer, or any specific sort of hill training?
I mean, I haven't done recently. I should be doing recently. Yeah, I mean, usually I would try and do kind of some hill reps, and maybe like 1 or 2 sessions a week, of like usually one flat and one in the hills, both uphill and downhill. I think doing downhill reps, they're really fun. Plus you get a lot of uphill when you're walking back to the downhill, but it's quite good to train for, and it makes you feel fast and then you run faster from doing it. So,
and obviously we probably have an amazing breadth of standards of people on this call, so even beginners shouldn't feel intimidated about doing speed work. Would you say that it's important just to do, whatever your level, just do one session slightly out of your comfort zone every week?
I think so, even if it's just doing some strides on the way back from a run. I said I haven't done any speed work for a long time. Today I actually forced myself to go and I thought I haven't done speed work for a long time, I should try and run fast. I just did 10 by 1 minute fast on the canal, just to kind of get yourself used to running fast. Even though you may not be doing that in ultramarathon, it means you're running with good form, and it kind of gets your body used to working at a bit of a harder level. So
yeah. Okay, and when it comes to kit, obviously there's so many, all of us are being bombarded with kit choices from, not just from Las Fortiva, which is good kit, but a lot of kit. We're talking about summer running, obviously the next few months, but when you go to the hills, this is a basic sort of minimum of kit you take with you just to make sure you're looking after yourself no matter what might happen.
Yeah, I mean, I would always, I know it is, as you said, coming up to summer, I'd still carry quite a lot of kit with me. And I'd much rather have too much kit that I don't use, I'm carrying a bit of extra weight, than not have something on the hill. So for example, I know my hands always get super cold. And if my hands get cold, I can't do anything. I can't call for help. I can't look at directions. I can't eat anything. So I've always got at least one pair of gloves with me, however warm it is. But things like having an emergency foil blanket, I've always got one in my pack. I've usually got a pair of waterproof trousers and a waterproof jacket, gloves, buff. Yeah, I mean, obviously I would look at the forecast and see what it's predicting, but we are in the UK, like we kind of tend to get all seasons in one day. So you can go out of the house in your t-shirt and shorts and suddenly you're wearing full waterproofs. And that's happened to me a few times this year already. So
have you personally ever had a bad experience where you felt you didn't have enough kit with you?
I've had experiences where I've turned back because I haven't had the right kit. So okay. Like a few friends and I were running up Ben Lomond, sorry, one day, and at the bottom it was lovely, and there were people, you know, kind of walking up in jeans, so we went up in our t-shirt and shorts, and we had waterproofs with us, but we got about 3/4 of the way up and it started to hail, and we were by this point already wearing our waterproofs and thought this isn't fun, and we turned around and went back and did a bit of a run along the bottom instead, and so that's with having the right kit. So I've never really been caught out, touch wood, not having, you know, what I might need. But yeah, that felt like, I guess thinking, especially if you're with other people or you may come across someone on the hill who's injured, you know, could you stop and look after someone or look after yourself if you couldn't run? Or are you going to get too cold? And as I said, I get cold very easily. So yeah.
So I guess the takeaway from that is that no matter how beguiling the trails are, and we all love them, it's always have an eye on the weather and check the forecast before you go. Yes. Yeah, and it's worth carrying that extra bit of weight. Yeah. Have you ever got seriously lost when you've been out on the trails?
I mean, not seriously lost. Like I've always found my way back in the end. I'm not great at direction. I've taken a bunch of navigation courses and I can read a map, but I tend to just get a bit carried away, especially if I'm running on a marked trail, and then I won't look at signs. Once in the Dolomites, I was on the first day of a multi-day run on my own, and I ran like 4 kilometers down the valley in the wrong direction, and then was chasing daylight to try and get to a hut in time before dark, and that wasn't great. And I had to hitchhike back up the road to be able to do that. And I mean, even in Scotland, like there'll be times when I think I know where I am, and it turns out I'm not in the right place at all. I guess when I go out, especially on my own, I usually use like the Strava send beacon to my husband so he knows where I am. He's never had to come and rescue me or anything, but I figure that's a useful thing to do if I'm on my own. And usually, if I'm on a new trail, I will try and plan where I'm going and plan if I do get lost, or, you know, if I get injured or something, work out kind of escape routes.
It's good. Yeah, and it's all in the planning, obviously. Yeah, planning ahead. Yeah, great. Yeah. So we've had a nice little chat there and covered several things there. If anyone wants to put anything in the chat room, any specific questions for Rachel just now, we'll take a couple of questions before we move on to our next speaker. But there's several good takeaways there. Wherever you are on your running journey, there's lessons to be learned, and we're all learning things as we go along. So do put some things in the chat room if you have any questions for Rachel. Yes. Okay, this is from Sarah. What do you like to eat when you're running ultras?
So I've tried a bunch of different things, and 2 weeks ago I did a 12-hour race from the house. So I kind of came back to the house each time and I cooked up all these new things to try, and I cooked up like rice cakes and polenta cakes and flapjacks, and didn't want to really eat any of those. It turned out sort of a few hours into the race. I usually eat Rice Krispie squares, sometimes like little chocolate Swiss rolls, flapjacks I can usually go down quite well. I tend to, because I'm allergic to nuts, so I'm always a bit worried about aid stations at races. So I tend to kind of have enough food with me so that I know that I can eat whatever I've got. I tend to like savoury food later on in the race or in a run or whatever. So there's quite, I make like chili cheese flapjacks and they go down quite well.
That's some good suggestions. There's a couple of people, Alexia, I'm picking up on as well. And I think David McNabb possibly earlier was wondering, do you have any suggestions for run-walk techniques in a long run? How ratio of run to walk, or just walk the hills, run the rest?
I would try and walk the hills and run the rest. And someone once told me that if you can see the top of the hill, you should try and run up it. But I guess it sort of depends how steep that is, so and how long the race is. So I probably use my judgment on that. Yeah, I tend to walk. I mean, walk if it's very long, walk the hills unless you can run them easily, like if they're not that steep, and run the rest later on in a race. I try and, if it's flat certainly, or downhill, try and run it.
And I think it was David was asking, how much water do you carry with you on an average run?
So during the winter, I haven't been carrying that much. But I guess it depends on my average run, how long that is. I usually come back with water, so I brought a bit too much. I usually have at least a litre with me. If I'm not going out for long, obviously I wouldn't, but like for a kind of a long day in the hills, I'd take at least a litre and probably have looked into where I might be able to find some more. But obviously it depends how hot it is and things like that.
Yeah. And someone else is asking, what are your favourite shoes?
What are my favourite shoes?
The shoe yes.
I mean, it depends a bit on what I'm running. At the moment, I'm really enjoying the Las Fortiva Jackals, which are kind of for ultra. They're a new shoe from that were released last year for sort of ultra distance running. I've been wearing them a lot in the last year. I think I'll probably race in them this year. Before that, the Las Fortiva Helios, I really like. It's super light, and that's kind of the first shoe I put it on and I feel fast. So if I'm kind of feeling like I want to go and do a fast session, or I want to go and run fast on the trails, I put that shoe on.
Okay, that's great. And there's a couple others on training, but I think we'll leave them and bring Kim in on that a bit later. So there's specifics on uphill and downhill, yeah, which we can all come back on. So I think we'll move on from there. Thanks ever so much for that, for Rachel. Thank you for now, but we'll bring you back in later when we come to our general question and answers. And thanks for all the questions in the chat. Do keep them coming, and we'll try and feature as many as we can as we go along through the evening. So next up, I want to bring in John Samways from Las Fortiva. And John, as well as being a successful businessman in making Las Fortiva work in the UK, he's also a very competent ultra runner himself. Perhaps not at the same level as Rachel and Kim are, but would you call yourself a competent mid-packer, John? Yes.
Definitely a mid-pack runner. Yeah, indeed.
He's being very humble, but I have to say this, at the weekend, John actually completed the Thames Path 100. Yeah. So he's having a well-earned rest tonight, but he's done races in Europe. He's done several of James Elsham's Centurion series. He's done the Highland Fling a few times. So you've got someone involved in a major sports brand who's also absolutely passionate about just getting out there and just trashing himself as well, which we can all relate to. Yeah,
absolutely. Thanks, Adrian.
But John's going to share a little bit about the history of Las Fortiva, and hopefully we'll get a little bit about his own running as well as we go along. So over to you, John, for just a little bit about the Las Fortiva story.
No problem. Thanks, Adrian. So I've worked with Las Fortiva. Can you all see the slides, by the way? Yeah, cool. I've worked with Sportiva since 2004. I'm a keen runner, as Adrian mentioned. Before becoming a runner, I was a climber. I dabbled also in triathlon for a little while. Once I got a family, I realised I didn't have the time for climbing. It took up so much of my time, but I still wanted to explore, have new adventures and see beautiful places. And I quickly realised that trail running enabled me to do that. So I kind of started that 9 years ago, and I've been hooked ever since. The aim of this talk is to give you a brief history of Las Fortiva, and I'll add some tips from my own personal experiences, not just from running, but also the aid stations and races that I've volunteered at, so what I've seen from other runners as well while I've been on my journey. Las Fortiva was established in 1928. It was originally handcrafting leather boots for lumberjacks and farmers in the local valley in Italy. Today they make a broad range of products. Some of you might know them for climbing or mountaineering boots, but they also do ski mountaineering, running, hiking, and in recent years they've added an apparel collection to the brand. The story of Las Fortiva can't be told like any other company, because the foundation has been created through the athletes, through the alpinists, through the climbers, through the runners, and getting their feedback, which has helped them bring the company to where they are today. So they won't always produce something for everybody, but they will produce something that is suitable for the activity on the trails in the mountains. Las Fortiva's past is made up of alpinism, passion, and innovation. Las Fortiva has been operating for 90 years in this valley. It's a beautiful valley in the foothills of the Dolomites, but they want to protect their surroundings. Such a location, sorry, I'm losing my track a little bit. Such a location fosters a strong sense of responsibility for both social and environmental issues. These have always played a vital role within the company as it strives to make use of the low environmental impact technology and production methods. The image on the screen shows the factory, but what it doesn't show is the significant tunnels below it, where they have the warehouse. They want to minimize the visual impact in the valley as much as they possibly can. They are ISO 14001 certified, which puts focus on the environment and requires the business to employ eco-friendly solutions. They're always in search of new technologies, methods and materials which allow them to update and improve products in a more sustainable way. They're an EOCA partner, European Outdoor Conservation Association. On Black Friday, they donate 1% of their profits to EOCA. And this does things like cleaning of the mountains in Kyrgyzstan, protection of the brown bears in Spain, the greening of forests in the Czech Republic, the creation of cross-border hiking trails in Macedonia and Albania, and trying to rescue deforestation in Sweden, trying to bring the forest back to Sweden. And it's a really good project, and they're very, very much behind EOCA. Today, they continue to look at ways to use recycled material in product. On some of their rock climbing shoes, for example, the sweepings in the factory are used to produce a sole for the climbing shoes. And it's called the Mythos Eco, but quite an innovative idea. This is the family. Narciso Deladio was the original founder of the business. The girl in the image here, she was a little girl when we started working with her in 2004. She's at the forefront of the business today. She's normally the host of sales meetings, and she's really driving all the marketing efforts. And she's the great granddaughter of Narcesco. Lorenzo Deladio, that you see reading the notes here, he is the CEO of the business, and his father, Francesco, sadly died a few years ago, but when we worked with him, he always attended the sales meetings, he always came to the trade show, he always wanted to meet the athletes, and he just had that great passion and belief for what Sportiva is about. And it's not just about the family you see on the screen here. When we go over to visit, we're treated like that. The athletes are treated like it. And as I mentioned in the early slides, it's the athletes which make the brand. It's the community that make the brand. Everybody comes together. It's a true family feel. Sorry, Rachel. This is Rachel running the Lavaredo Ultra Trail. It's a key international event in the Dolomites in Cortina, just around the corner from Sportiva. Historically, there was a perception with our brand that the shoes were designed just for these trails, that they weren't right for the hills or fells of the UK and the wet mud that we encounter. So going back to listening to the athletes and getting the real true feedback, Sportiva started to look for an international team. This is Anton Kapitschka from the US. who is working with the design team in Ziano and trying to give feedback to what the shoes are needed for the US and for other markets. This allowed the development of more running shoes. We've now got a complete range for all types of terrain and conditions. Just in terms of pushing innovation and trying to push technologies, they've always done it in rock shoes. The ski mountaineering boot was developed in the Mercedes Formula One. And this is a shoe here that they've developed with BOA. It's a brand new shoe on the market. It's a deep studded sole, but it's using this BOA system to really hold and lock the foot in. And it's just another example of Sportiva just keep pushing the technology. And some of you may know this person, and it's just talking about bringing that expertise in and trying to get that international feel. But this is Jonathan Wyatt, also known as Jono. Jonathan is originally from New Zealand. He's better known for being the 6 times Mountain World Running Champion and 8 times winner of the Mountain Running Grand Prix Series. He's now, I think he's head of the World Mountain Running Association as well. But incredible character. This is him in the UK, working with our team and listening to the feedback of UK athletes and really looking at the terrain in the UK to make sure that we've got the right product that's needed for runners in the UK. Jono lives in the valley now. He lives in Ziano. His wife is Italian cross-country skier, and he just happened to find himself in Cavallese, which was the perfect place for him to join Las Fortiva. Here in the UK, we've developed a strong team to ensure we can get feedback to help support the brand. Here are some images of team members out on the fells. This is Kim, who will be talking next. We've also got John Kelly. John Kelly is originally from the USA, but he moved his business over to the UK a few years ago. Some of you may have seen the achievements he's made here in the UK already. If you haven't, keep an eye out for the FKT film or the Grand Round. They're both brilliant to watch. And yeah, this is John Kelly. And then this is just an image of our team meet in 2019. Alongside our team and international field, we also link to a lot of key events now in the UK. These include the Lakeland 50 and 100, the Centurion Running Series in the south, the Highland Fling, which I know we've got John Duncan here tonight, so hello John, and the Grand Tour of Skidder, amongst many other local events and shorter distances as well. Internationally, we support Lavaredo, Leadville, Nuts, which is a race in sort of Finland, amongst again others. I know there's a lot in Spain as well. This allows us to get feedback from the running community. And pre-COVID, we did give people the chance to try demo shoes, go for short runs, that type of thing. I know we were at Glencoe. I know we've been at the Highland Fling, we've been at the training camps as well, giving people that opportunity to come and try shoes. And if it's people that just want to go on the trails for the first time, it gives them a real opportunity to see what the differences are on grip and everything else. And once COVID measures change and we can get back out and see the community, I know we're all looking forward to it. Yeah, I was just going to say my background is ultra, but we're not just about long endurance races. Our products cover everything from vertical kilometers to the ground round to running along your local river path. I didn't want to put this shot in because it's me making a bit of a fool out of myself, but I thought it was quite appropriate being the finish of the Highland Fling. And as Rachel said, this is as close to a European race as you're ever going to get. The atmosphere at this race is just brilliant. From the start to the red carpet finish and the support you get from everybody along the way, it is just brilliant. So I wanted to share that with you. And the other thing with ultra running is it isn't about winning. The challenge to complete a race for yourself, whether you're first or last, I think that joy that I've got crossing the line there says everything. It looks like I've won the race, but I haven't. I was just really, really happy to finish and get a beer. So that's that. So tips from a mid-pack runner. On my journey through completing races, volunteering at checkpoints and also kit checks, I wanted to share some tips. There is so much kit to choose from. Get advice from experts. Run and Become of a range this evening, and I know they have experienced runners in their stores who can help select the right kit for you. It's not always about the lightest. Think about the conditions and what kit might be best for you. Don't select something because a friend says it's great. It might be for them. Don't buy something just because your hero is using it. The Thames Path 100, I completed it, as Adrian said, on Sunday morning. I wasn't sure on Thursday what shoe I would take. The Acacia is well cushioned, it's got good grip. Did it have the stability that I wanted, knowing that it was going to be raining, there was going to be big rutted puddles and all sorts of things. So then there's the Mutant, so good in the mountains for technical ground, but this is the Thames Path. In the wet, would I compromise cushioning and stability for the muddy sections? The Jackal, great cushioning for the hard pack sections through London. What I'm really trying to say is always a compromise, but work out what you feel is best for you. I actually opted for the Jackal in the end and feel it was the right shoe on the day. But yeah, always look at the conditions and always think what is best for you. The other thing I put is run smart. The easiest way to make up time is through efficiency. Train on your longer runs with your vest on. There's a lot of questions about water and things like that. Again, you can get little soft bottles with water filters and things in. You can scoop from streams and drink them, and that can make you lighter and more efficient. But train with your vest on. Get used to where the kit is. Open your bottles before entering a checkpoint. Get some filled up quicker. Get your rubbish ready to like hand in at the checkpoint. It just speeds everything for you. So I put save time at checkpoints and avoid the seat. Clothing. Again, think conditions. This is a classic area that people save a few grams, but then they might suffer. Adrian talked, have you ever been compromised? Have you ever been caught out? How many events have I attended when the requirement for a waterproof jacket, but somebody turns up with a showerproof? This will stop the wind, but you will get wet, and importantly, you'll fail kit check, which means you suddenly have an expensive bill on the day for a new jacket, or you need to rent one or borrow off a friend or whatever else. If you look inside your jacket, you can see whether the seams have been taped. This is the first indication of it is waterproof. There are different levels of waterproof. Some of the conditions I saw Kim running in this winter just were eye-watering, and you want to be in a full mountaineering outfit for some of what I saw Kim out in. But if heavy rain is forecast, if you're in a colder climate, personally, I would go for a Gore Active shell. I had a basic waterproof I could have run in at the weekend. I opted for the Gore Active because I knew that there was strong winds due. I knew that it breathes, but more important, I knew that it was going to beat the water from me. So do look at that. Rachel mentioned about gloves and hats and things. It's amazing how many times I've been quite warm, supporting on the South Downs Way. It's a summer's day, and people have come in and said, have you got any gloves? I'm really, really cold. Have you got any gloves? And I've lent them to people. I've always made sure I've had a few spare there, and everybody's always given me back, which is interesting. But it's because people haven't been eating on the day, their body's beginning to shut down, and it could be a really warm evening, but suddenly they're feeling really cold. I think that tip to take hats and gloves is a really good one. Enjoy it, enjoy the journey. And if you go and recce the course, honestly, the days you're having the bad bits when you're running through that section, you can remember the fun time you had when you're on your training recce. For me, when I completed UTMB, it was a perfect race, but there was loads of people around. When I did the 4-day recce of it, probably the best holiday I ever had. And enjoy that journey, enjoy the journey to your race day, some of the best days you'll have. And the final tip I give, I wasn't going to put this in here, but during one of the Highland Fling training camps, Adrian sort of asked me, what techniques do people have to get through the bad bits? And honestly, my tip is I count to 60. And I always say 60 is 1 minute. But if I can go really, really slowly, it's about 5 or 6 minutes before I get to 1 minute. And it just means that I've got through that bad section in the 1 minute that I've tricked myself. and I must have done that 30 or 40 times on Sunday. So that's my tip. Count to 60 really slowly. And then just finally, the talks tonight. Rachel, I know you do shorter distances and bits and pieces, but I do think of you as an endurance athlete, and it's the same with Kim. So we've definitely got a feel tonight to ultra distance. But as you can see from this final slide, Las Fortiva have a broad range of shoes and different width fittings to suit everybody. And yeah, in 2004, I'd have probably shown you 2 shoes on this slide, and it just shows how far we've come as a brand to be able to offer a full comprehensive range of shoes in the UK now. That's everything from me. I hope I haven't gone too quickly and people have managed to understand me. It's always difficult on virtual, but thank you for the opportunity, Adrian.
That's fine. Thanks very much, John. And from Run and Become's point of view, we're always so impressed dealing with a company like yourselves, and there's others we deal with that are essentially a family operation. And although they've grown to be a big organization, have still kept that little family feel. And you treat all your customers like family as well, which can't be said for every manufacturer, should we say. No names, no Packville. Yeah. So has anyone got any questions about Las Fortiva or the history of Las Fortiva, or any general questions on kit while you've got John here? Do put them in the chat box. Maybe everyone is satisfied. You mentioned your favorite shoe, John. It was do you have a favorite shoe of all time, or are you just, as you said, there's no perfect shoe for every day, it's just playing the percentages of where you're going?
My colleague asked me this earlier, and he said, if you had to take one shoe, John, what would it be? And I think it has to be the Mutant. I've done one of the Fling rounds in it, I've done some of the Centurion races in it, did UTMB in it, and I think if I had to take one shoe, it would probably be the Mutant. Like Rachel, I'm really enjoying the Jackal right now, but I think the Mutant is the biggest all-rounder that we have. It just lacks a little bit of cushioning for where I live.
A few questions coming in. With so many different shoes out there, how do you recommend working out which ones are the best for you?
Go to the experts, go into the store, try the shoes on, try a range of shoes. That would be my tip, and look at the conditions that you're running in mainly.
Yep.
And the other thing that struck me, I used to work in an independent shop many years ago, and I used to say to people about having 2 pairs. And people used to think I was absolutely mad, but you can rotate them and they will last twice as long. It's not twice the cost to have 2 pairs. And it does allow you to rotate and then be able to use the right shoe for the right occasion. And I know a lot of trail runners, for example, will probably have a road running shoe because it gives them more cushioning for when they want to go and do those speed sessions. So I think don't be afraid to do that.
A couple of other questions on shoes specifically. Colin Wood is asking, more for Rachel, would you recommend the Lakeland for the Pentland Hills type trails?
I was just about to reply in the chat. I have worn them, the Lakeland in the Pentlands, but it was dry. So I guess they don't have the biggest tread, but like for the summer months, yeah, they're fine. You might want a bit more grip in the winter or when it's wet.
And this is one either for John or for Kim, and it's Johnny Duncan. Hi, John. How does the Jackal compare to the Mutant?
The Jackal has got lots more cushioning in, but doesn't have the depth in the lugs that the Mutant has. And I personally think the Mutant is a little bit more stable. I don't know if Kim agrees with me on that.
Yeah, I would use the Jackal for the Highland and Fling,
yeah.
For the harder packed trails, and then the Mutant for probably going up Ben Lomond and back down.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would echo that. I've used the Mutant over the winter through all the snow up here in Scotland. It's a fabulous shoe for all the really rough stuff, yeah, and the wild stuff. And question which we often asked a lot in store too, which is probably more for John. What is the difference between volume and width in a shoe, or is it the same?
Depends on which brand you're talking about as much
Yeah.
as anything.
Yeah.
Overall, a wider shoe is going to have increased volume, so it's a very difficult one to answer. I personally think they're very much the same. You can have a wider shoe which has got a bigger sole base and therefore that gives it more width, but you can have a higher volume which is still a narrower base but with more over the top of the shoe. But I would argue they're pretty much the same because one goes with the other.
I guess from our point of view, we're going to become, it's all about foot shape, and it is really a case of just getting into the store and trying a few on, yeah, just finding the one that works for you. Yeah. Okay, and just one last one on that. It's more about packs. This is from David McNabb again. Top tips for efficient packing of a pack for an ultra. Let's start with Rachel on that one. If you're doing an ultra, how do you efficiently pack your pack?
I would love to hear tips on this as well, actually. I think I tend to put things that, like the emergency kit that I hope to not use at the bottom of the pack, and things that I think I'm like food and things I'm going to need in the front. So I probably have bottles on the front and then food and stuff like easily accessible, because I don't really want to take my pack off unless I'm walking up a hill or something, in which case I can. But ideally, I try and keep everything so that I can reach it. But I guess it kind of comes back to John's point about like try it out in practice and, you know, put things in different places, see how it fits and see what works.
The one thing I would say is there is kit requirements. It's emergency. So something like Lakeland, you have to take emergency food. You've got the emergency blanket, that sort of thing. I personally would store that in a dry bag at the bottom of the bag because it doesn't want to come out. So don't get that anywhere near the top or get it in the way of anything. Just get that tucked away. That would be my one big tip.
And Kim, our expeditionary, what's your top tip for packing a pack for going either a training run or a race? Yes.
Make sure it's comfortable before you go out for your run, so you don't get any of the sore rubbing after a few miles, and then you go keep running and running and running, and then eventually you got a real big sore patch on your back. So just make sure it's comfortable and well padded before you leave the house or start the race.
And in terms of having access to things on the run, do you have a special order you pack your gear in? Is it looking at what you're going to be needing most of all when you're out running for easy access? Yes.
Yeah, so same as what's been said before, really. Keeping the hat and gloves at the top, waterproof close, you know, and then the emergency kit packed down below. Then I always like to have water and food handy because you don't want to be taking your pack off because you just end up not eating or not drinking. So it's got to be easily accessible and to hand, I would say.
Great.
The one last tip I would give is put things in a dry bag. You can get really light dry bags now, and don't forget that if it is raining and you need your waterproof on, there might be other stuff in your bag you want to keep dry. And I think it's one thing that can be forgotten. I don't know if you use one, Kim, at all. But that's what I'd recommend.
Yeah, standard. Everything goes in a dry bag into the rucksack.
Great. So that's covered that. There are a few other questions on training coming in, but we'll save them for a general sort of training bash at the end. So thanks very much for that, John. Very good to hear all the background about how Las Fortiva is still just this little family operation. Well, not a little family operation, but there's still a family connection, even though you're now a global organization. Yeah. So moving on to our final speaker, Mr. Kim Collison, legend of the lakes. What can I say about Kim that most of you don't already know, except he likes doing things long and doing things out of the ordinary. Pushing the comfort zone out is probably an understatement for someone like Kim. Just to mention some of his achievements, if any of you don't know, he's run for Great Britain in the Ultra Trail team, got bronze medals for Great Britain in Annecy in 2015, top 20 place. He's run things like UTMB and CCC. Over the last few years, though, he's found his niche in doing just the long, big rounds, the classic rounds in the UK that we have that no other country really has, like the Bob Graham and the Paddy Buckley and the Charlie Ramsey. And Kim has the winter record for the Bob Graham round in the Lakes, and just a couple of weeks ago set a overall time for the Paddy Buckley round in the Welsh Mountains. So Kim, how did you first start out running? You didn't start out doing long things. Did you start off just doing small things to start with? And did you start on the road, on the hills? Or what's your background in running from a younger age?
I guess it started with inspiration of my dad running the London Marathon many years ago. I must have been 10 or something. And then following in his footsteps, going, right, I want to run now. And getting inspired by that big journey then. So then I wasn't very good at football, but I was good at running a long way, and just we lived in the countryside, so I was always outside running and playing and being active. And so by the time I got to cross country in secondary school, I found I actually was fairly good and enjoyed that running. And I remember a key moment sitting in a changing room, and then the PE teacher that didn't normally take cross country came in to select the team for the county cross country. And obviously, because I wasn't a football player, I didn't get selected, although I was probably one of the better runners at the time. So I can remember next year turning up and winning all the school cross countries just to prove a point. So I guess that was a key moment in my development of, right, I'm actually quite good at this, and that determination to improve and be resilient. So that kind of passion developed in a younger age, and I remember doing mountain marathons because we were quite adventurous and did scouts, and so it came to be the natural progression. So and seeing people from my local running club, used to live in Hertfordshire at the stage, Tring, and they were going up to do the Om. So I think my first mountain marathon was the Saunders. It must have been maybe 16, and doing it with a friend of a dad, and just having a whale of a time. So I always got that sense of adventure and long stuff quite early. I guess then university and travel happened for a wee years, and it wasn't until 27, when I was 27, I came back and settled in the Lake District and just started running and building up, and then dreamt of the Bob Graham round. And so when I was an outdoor instructor, so I was always spending plenty of time in the hills, in the mountains, at work and at play. So it just built up, and at the same time, you're in the Lake District, you're at the home of fell running. So what do? You start these fell races, and with a competitive spirit, you improve and get better, and things get bigger or faster.
And you've obviously done mountain marathons, and for anyone who's just starting out on their trail running journey, traditional mountain marathons are 2-day events where you do a certain distance one day, navigating around the hills, carrying everything with you, including your tent and your stove and your pitch up overnight. And then, hey ho, next day, do the same thing again and end up in a different place. Yeah. Doing things like that, does that give you that sort of self-reliance of just learning about the hills and how to get from A to B and navigating, etc.?
Yeah, it teaches you a lot of skills of how to look after yourself. So, okay, I'm out all day. I need to be able to learn to eat. If I don't eat, I'm not going to be able to do the second day. Or that, oh, it's going to rain now. If I don't put my waterproof on, I'm going to be very cold in a couple of hours, and I've got to sleep in a tent. So you start all that personal administration. You learn to do things quickly and efficiently, and you practice that. So those skills that become second nature now. And then it's really good opportunity to learn the navigation, so that you start to look at the map, look at the surroundings, learn the best routes across hills, across fells, and then now I hardly ever need to use a map, because I've learned the fells, but I always carry it. And you sort of get that vision of, okay, that's the best way from A to B from years of studying it, covering the terrain.
And you learn all the little tips, like sometimes the shortest route isn't always the quickest. It's following the contours on a map and learning the lie of the land like that. Yes, yeah. So
yeah, and when it's good to run and when it's good to walk, that's also, you start to learn, okay, so actually I could take this longer route round, actually it's a bit quicker running because it's on a good footpath, or if I go straight across there, it's through a load of heather and rocky boulder field. Although it looks shorter, I'm going to be like struggling to walk across it. So you kind of learn what to look for and develop an understanding of timing and distance.
The fact that hills distances always look closer than they actually are in reality, you mean? Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone beginners on this call, even if you're just running your local hills, it always takes much longer to get to somewhere you think is close. So it's always factoring that in, that you think you might be out for a couple of hours, but you might end up being out for much longer. So you have to factor that in with all your kit and your food and nutrition as well. Yes. Yeah. So as you built up on your journey, when did you first start doing really big days in the hills? Yes.
I guess you need to define what you mean by really big days in the hills.
Well, figuring you were good enough to have a go at something like the Bob Graham, to be able to stay on your feet for sort of 15, 16, 20 hours, whatever, on a day. Yeah. And being on the move the whole time. Yes.
For me, I guess that came early because from the mountain marathon experiences and being able to, that I could look after myself and then do it the second day. So I already knew that I could spend 6, 7, 8 hours of exercise, rest, do another 6, 7, 8 hours, and keep going, even if it was hiking, and which mostly is when you're doing the long ultra stuff. A lot of it is hiking and then running when you can on the downs and the flats. And then I think part of my job as an outdoor instructor, I was out for long days with students and helping them out. So I was always had that sense of I can keep going for a long time. So for me, then start building up the distances in the runs, and then getting comfortable with, okay, can I run 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours? Just not. I think sometimes we get trapped into always trying to run our hardest for 3 hours, 2 hours, 4 hours, when actually it's just being comfortable doing activity for that duration of time, so that when you finish that, you don't feel totally broken and knackered. So once you get to that stage of, I can spend 4 hours hiking in the hills, right? Can I spend 4 hours doing a little bit of hiking and jogging in the hills, and start to build it up in that direction? It does get to a point where there's a bit of diminishing return. To do a 24-hour, you're not going to go and train for 13, 14 hours in the hills or on the mountains, because you're going to be broken or tired for 2 weeks or a week after and not be able to do any more running and training. So it comes to a point in where you have to go, yes, I think I can do it. Let's go and see. And then you find out or not.
How important would you say is actually, because obviously over the years living in the lakes, there's such a camaraderie amongst the fell community. How much relevance is it in just mixing with like-minded people who just sort of also into pushing out their boundaries in their own ways, that you build up a whole mindset of just being able to push out to go that long and that fast for so long? Yes.
Yeah, but I think the peers you associate with and compete against always push you on and drive you on. and it's a supportive. So you grow up helping other people achieve their ambitions. I remember helping, like growing up, seeing Steve Birkinshaw winning like mountain marathons, and then the Lakeland 100, and then you get that ambition of, okay, how can I help them? And then you learn, you join the same club with them, and then you end up running the on with them, and you grow in that experience, and that you learn from them, and that inspires you to go, okay, actually, I can do that now. It's my time to try and inspire others to achieve. I mean, races are so competitive, so you always end up staying humble because you're never going to win the race every time. So you're always trying to ways to improve and get better.
So looking at sort of 3 of the biggest achievements you've done in the last few years, just for anyone on the call who isn't familiar with the Lakeland 24-hour record, just describe what that actually involves.
So that involves, well, for me, it involved running up 78 Lakeland peaks and finishing at the same point as I started within 24 hours. So I think the statistics were roughly about 96 miles and about 12,000 meters of up and down across the roughest fells in the Lake Districts. And so about a Bob Graham and a half inside 24 hours. And so the normal challenge is to do a Bob Graham within 24 hours, and that's a fantastic challenge to do and to aspire to, and anyone that does that gets to join the Bob Graham Club. Over the years, people started adding on tops, and eventually it got to Mark Hartel, who it stood for about 20 or almost 30 years. He had it 77 peaks. So yeah, last year I managed to believe that I could do it and attempted it.
And did you have
it was that year of records?
Yes. Did you have pacers with you while you were doing it, or was it a complete solo attempt?
No, because it's developed over the years to really stretch you. You get pacers that help carry your food and your drink and your spare clothing, so that all you've got to concentrate is carrying your own body weight. And then that the encouragement they can offer and support when you're tired in terms of navigation, and so you don't have to think, just have to move, is crucial, especially during the dark hours in the top of the mountain and you've got 2 meter visibility. You rely on those people. So for me to make that record achievable, I needed that level of support. The next level is going all on your own without support. You know, if you could do that, it kind of gives you a bit more kudos.
And do you think someone will take that on in the course of time?
The record, I'm sure there will be.
Or just doing it unsupported, trying to do it unsupported. Yeah.
Well, we all know a man that probably could attempt it or could think about it.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So
there's not many though.
No, it's really getting to for most normal people, it's the extremes of endurance. But as you are living proof of, records are there to be broken, and you can always push them out a bit further. You think you've reached the finite, and then someone else comes along and just has a different mindset and says, okay, yeah, records are there to be broken, and someone will do it eventually. Yeah. I mean, comparing doing the 24-hour round with just doing a regular Bob Graham, is it just more endurance rather than sort of just the raw speed in inverted commas in trying to cover the ground quickly?
I guess there's I mean, if we're looking at the 78 compared to the Bob Graham round, I think the Bob Graham round is much more in the getting the endurance to be able to endure and cope with the amount of descending and ascending. Whereas when you start pushing the extremes, it is about, okay, a slightly higher intensity. Can I maintain that higher intensity for longer? And it's just trying to learn your body to cope with what is the pacing strategy that gives me the best result at the end of the time limit.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of learned a little bit through trial and error and experience and blowing up and getting races wrong. I remember the Highland Fling a few years ago, the trial race, and there was a group of us racing out at the front, and I blew up at the end of the race, and then had to kind of limp home for third place and managed to pull it round. Sometimes that happens, or you're racing, you're risking everything for the reward because it's so extreme, and you push a little bit too hard. I've DNF'd UTMB because of the reward you hope for, and you get it wrong, so you end up blowing up. But sometimes through all that experience and knowledge, you get the right pace, and you succeed. And that's whatever level you're at. When you're challenging yourself and pushing yourself out of that comfort zone, sometimes you stretch the boundary a little too far, or you just get it just right, and you grow that knowledge of what you can achieve, and it gets a little bit bigger.
So just briefly, because I'm aware time is getting on, you hold the winter Bob Graham record. When you went and did the Paddy Buckley recently in Wales, you obviously had Matt Roberts. Did Matt Roberts have the record before?
Yeah.
Yeah. You obviously had his schedule and what he did. Were you setting out just to run your own race, or were you aware of racing the clock and his schedule?
So I had the schedule, because my goal was to try and break his record. In my mind, that was the objective. But I always set out at my own intensity, at my own pace, and knowing what I can do, and then I'm comparing it against what he's done. So you've always got the knowledge of previous experience, so then it gives you kind of the motivation of and knowledge of, yes, I'm up on their splits, right? Can I sustain it? Right? Can I push a little bit harder, or do I need to back off? And you then use it as a benchmarking tool for your effort.
Right. Yeah. And when you set the record recently, was there any point, it's more dealing with mental skills, was there any point in the whole operation when you felt you might not get it? Were there any real low points that you had to deal with?
Yeah, I guess about 4/5 of the way through, I was having a real quite low point. My fueling had dropped off, just because my stomach wasn't wanting as much food as had been taking on earlier. So I was just having a little bit of an energy dip, which I recognised, and then started to force down some food because there's no other way out of it other than to eat more. So I started eating more. Your energy starts coming back, and when your pace is sort of telling you, not telling you you're dropping time, but telling you to hurry up, you kind of click in your head that you're dropping minutes. So it was enough of an incentive with well times, getting more nutrition in, to push hard again. And then I managed to pull through it and maintain the splits again. So you get to a point where you know it's going to happen.
Yeah, which is obviously the goal. Just moving on a little bit, you've obviously got into coaching in quite a big way for the last couple of years and giving something back to the sport. We had a few questions earlier, which might apply to your own running as well. How much of sort of, when you're training for anything in the trails of the hills, are there sort of set sort of advice you give to runners in terms of running uphill and running downhill, and trying to fit that into a weekly or a monthly schedule?
Yeah, I guess the first thing to think about is in intensity. That because when you're first setting out, often every run feels like it's really hard. It's trying to understand actually controlling intensity and being able to run at a pace where you can have a conversation. And if it starts to become that you can't have a conversation, then actually walking is probably better. So it's building up that ability to run duration at a comfortable talking pace. Once you can do several days in a week, that sort of intensity, it's then adding the one maybe specific session into your plan, and to try and improve how well you can run up a hill. So you might put in some intervals. So it might be, you might start off doing some short intervals. You might start off only doing a minute and 4 or 5 repetitions of a minute. And then you might build up to looking at different intensities. So you might be looking at how hard you can run for a minute, or versus 15 minutes of constant effort, or actually, can I run hard for up the whole hill, combined with the longer, slower duration running. And this can be phased throughout the year depending on where you are and what you're doing. The thing with hill running, I would say, is and uphill and down running, is finding slopes that take you out of the comfort zone but don't arouse you too much and put you into a fear place. If the hill is too steep or too rocky and loose, all you're going to do is shut down and not learn anything. So you need to bring yourself back to a gentle grassy slope and practice running downhill down that grassy slope. And I find downhill running is thinking about relaxation. Can you think of can I breathe naturally? Can I hold a good tall posture? And then can I look ahead so that I can spot where I'm going to put my feet a few steps ahead? Once you become confident and happy and feel like you're flowing down that hill, maybe then you notch up a little bit of steepness or add a little bit of technicality into it. So it's just trying to push your boundaries in the right level and deliberately practice it. So Rachel was talking about practicing downhill reps. And I think that's about doing it over and over again and thinking about how can I do it a little bit better? What does that rock feel like? What does that patch of grass feel like? Do my shoes grip on that? Have I got enough studs? And all those things through my head, so that when you come to a race, it becomes second nature. It's subconscious. You've learnt that skill, but you do need to think about it in the first place. Same with uphill running. Pick a slope for the time of interval you're going to do that you can run up, so that you practice that intensity that you need running. Otherwise, you're just going to switch to a walk. Saying that, hiking is a key part of hill running, and even at the front end, I spent most of my time on the Paddy Buckley, other than perhaps the first couple of hills, actually hiking up the hill. So it's a really important skill to practice, and often runners end up hiking like they're running, and it's a really good opportunity to change your muscle groups, open your stride, and if you watch a race walker, they've got a totally different gait from a runner. So you've got to try and think, actually, walking is a different gait. It's an opportunity to rest my calves and use different muscle groups. And then when you come to running, your calves and the other muscles are ready to go again. So it's little things like that.
Fascinating. Yeah.
I'll stop there.
Time is catching up with us, but I just want to open up the chat room now. Some chat is starting to come in, actually. Yes. How do you balance comfort and weight on a mountain marathon? For example, do you carry a mat? It's a bit of a specific question. That's from Sarah Wallace to everybody.
I guess that comes down to goals and what you want from the mountain marathon. If you're running it for the podium and elite, then you sacrifice comfort and and I've carried like bubble wrap before and and probably don't really sleep that much. Whereas if I'm doing it for just the pleasure of being out in the mountains and enjoying the experience of navigating through the place I have not been, then I might put in the mat and carry extra food and not worry about the extra weight, because my goals are different. So it's different there, I think. And then there's intermediates on the scale.
Question from CM, which you could probably talk for an hour on, but better try and limit it to a couple of minutes. But when you want to improve your interval training, what's the effect of extending the whole session, i.e. doing more intervals versus doing longer intervals versus reducing the recovery? Mathematical juggling of intervals, basically, yes.
So I kind of think of it as, what am I trying to improve? And so on duration of interval. So there becomes a point, if I'm trying to work on my top end, like aerobic VO2 max, then I'm going to keep my intervals fairly short, probably 3 minutes at a maximum, before I'm going to have to start losing the intensity of it, and then it's probably matching that recovery to the duration of a run for that one. Whereas if I'm trying to work on my sort of threshold area, then I might be looking at 10 minutes or 8 to 15 minutes of interval time, and then the more you can keep the intensity at the desired intensity for 10 minutes, you might extend the duration of that interval to 12 minutes and see if you can maintain that intensity. And then the sort of general recommendation is, for that sort of work, is 2 to 1 recovery to work, so half the time recovery running for hills. There's lots of variations for them. Yeah, it's hard one to go into depth of.
Yeah, and that's quite a technical question for some. Anyone new to trail running or just graduating from roads to the trails, don't be intimidated by that, because you're probably doing your own version of intervals. So you're just going from lamppost to lamppost. We're doing 1 minute hard, 1 minute easy. There are many variations depending on where you are on your journey. Yeah, and you find the one that works for you, I think. Yes. Valerie is asking, one for everybody, but you can start, Kim. How can you practice hills when you live in a flat place?
How can you practice hills? Well, there's ways.
Yes.
In Norfolk, there is hills. There is around Sheringham. There's a few hills. You have to go up and down them a few times to get the desired elevation change. So there is benefit in doing a couple runs, if there is any hill, to do that. Otherwise, treadmill is one of the only ways to get ascent practice, and can be a good way if you do want to do a mountain race and get specific uphill climbing and hill training. Some people have done the hiking up stairs, up tower blocks and back down, just to get the elevation and the step practice. So that is feasible. I think sometimes we can overemphasize that, because fitness kind of trumps specificity. So sometimes it's best just to focus on getting yourself as fit as possible, and then perhaps going for a training camp in a hilly place, or taking a weekend away to the hills to try and develop the specificity. And then I would generally find that it's the downhill running that you need the practice for at those camps, to work on to reduce the effect of DOMs from the eccentric contractions and of coming downhill lots.
John, you live in a fairly flat place. How do you get your hill work in?
I'm quite fortunate that normally I work in Cumbria 3 days a week. But the last year I've been in the flats, but I've tended to try and find a local hill and then just do repeats on it as much as possible. But exactly what Kim is saying there, what I miss out on is the long descending. And as soon as I go up to Cumbria, what catches me out is the long descending. And it's just, yeah, the muscle recovery and learning to relax. It's difficult.
And I guess, of course, Rachel, you can come in on this one. It's all relative to what you're training for. It's a classic coaching conundrum of look at your event. What does it involve? If you're training for a fairly flat sort of riverside trail event, you don't need to do a lot of hills, right? Or wrong?
No, I think that's mainly true. I mean, my next race is on the North Downs Way, and it's not super hilly compared to what I'm used to, so I actually haven't been doing as many hills lately. Whereas for Lakeland, it's obviously quite a lot of hills, so we do quite a lot more. And I guess, so when I did the race in the Dolomites a few years ago, I went out and was lucky enough to spend a month living out in the Dolomites beforehand to kind of acclimatise and get used to running there, because actually the big descents in the Dolomites are a lot bigger than the descents in the Scottish mountains. So yeah, it was definitely, if you can do that, that's great. But if you can't, I mean, everything that John and Kim have said, yeah.
So there's a question there on how much of your success is dealing with the mental challenge as opposed to the physical.
Good question.
I think it's a huge part of the ultra racing and challenge aspects, because there's only so much time and training that you can do and that your body can cope with. And then you get to that point of it's just manipulating that to get yourself in a fit place. And then it's actually thinking, for me, a large part of it is how do you deal with problems? How do you challenge that? How do you visualize the race? How do you think about the route? How do you think about what are the problems you might face? So you try and problem solve before you hit them. So how do I deal with blisters? Or if I start to feel sick, and so you develop those sort of strategies. I think also developing a strong why am I doing this helps, so that in those really, really low moments, you've got something to go, actually, this is why I'm doing it. And often it refers to that finish line smile at the end where you're jumping for joy and you know that you've achieved your challenge and your goal. And all that time you've put into it. I think it's also going and looking back at what all that training you've done and drawing on that confidence of the hours and hours of training you've developed and go, right, I've got this. And then the other thing is, for me, is acceptance of failure, that it's okay to not succeed. And the reason that a lot of we do these challenges is for the adventure, and for me, adventure is the unknown. So you're risking failure because you're going into the unknown, and hence why I keep pushing my boundaries and challenging myself, is because I want to see if I can do stuff. There's a few aspects there to that question.
Rachel, do you have any more or less comparing the inner runner with the outer runner and how you motivate yourself during an event?
Kind of linking back to John's earlier point about counting to 60, I think just breaking it down into smaller chunks, like thinking, oh, I've still got 50 miles to run. That's a lot. So, thinking, okay, well, I'm just going to run to the next checkpoint, and then you get there, then you run to the next checkpoint. And there's always, counting to 60, I'm just going to run for 60 seconds and count really slowly. And then, and tell yourself I can walk after that. But actually, by the time you get there, you go into these highs and lows. So chances are by the time you get to that point, you've pulled out of it. And so you kind of start again from then. I guess just that kind of, as well as remembering all your training and everything you've done, thinking, well, there will be low points, but there'll also be highs. This is temporary, this is going to pass.
If I can just tip in something with my team manager's hat on, I've sometimes been faced with the problem of someone wanting to drop out of an event at a checkpoint. And my little parting shot to them is, well, you're feeling pretty crap at the moment, but you'll feel even worse tomorrow, realizing you didn't get to the finish line. That's a little help for answering that question. John, do you have a final tip for mental motivation?
No, I think a lot of the key points, for me, it's definitely running to aid stations, not thinking of the bigger picture and visualize the finish. I think I didn't complete Lavaredo, and the next night I went and played football, and I did 100 kilometers of the 120, but I had work the next day, and a little gremlin came into my head. How am I going to cope with working when I've been running all night? And I just went, I can't finish this. And I'd stopped visualizing that, crossing that line, and the smile and everything else. And my mind had gone somewhere else. And at that point, I wasn't finishing. But I think visualizing the finish and breaking it down, and they're key factors.
Great. On that note, I think it's time to draw it towards a close.
Hey, Adrian, there's one question on there about poles.
Oh,
any advice on
yes.
using running poles? The one thing I would say on that is, again, Kim and Rachel might have different views, but I use the clip-ins. So you've got a little glove that you can clip into. And for me, it helped me so much in just moving efficiently. It helps me with climbs, but also when you get to those hiking sections, especially as a mid-pack runner, I find I can walk 12, 13-minute mile pace with poles on the flat ground. And I think having the clip-ins just stops me over gripping. But do use them in training, because again, on UTMB, I didn't use my poles on the final climb because my shoulders were hurting more than my legs. So learn to use your poles efficiently. And it is an all body workout, but I swear by them. And I really do like the ones that clip in. I know on some Scottish races, you're not allowed them.
I think most Scottish races, you're not allowed them. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be my
so my tip is I generally use them for hiking and walking, and that when I'm using the poles, that my arms swing. If you're walking, your arms swing by your sides, and when you're running, your elbows are bent. So you've got to remember that actually you should try and use your poles with straight arms and not with bent arms. Generally, when you're hiking.
I first used poles because when I did the Lakeland 50, I got overtaken on an uphill by Charlie Sprosen, who just kind of came past me with his poles, just going really smoothly uphill when I was trying to run and just kind of shuffling along. And then I found out he did courses of how to run with poles. So I did one of his courses thinking, he obviously knows what he's doing. I caught him back on a downhill later, so it was fine. And that course was quite useful. But then when I've tried to use them in races, and again, it's because I haven't practiced enough with them. So I definitely recommend practicing. Like, is kind of knowing when to get them out and when to use them, because hiking uphill with them, that's fine. But if I've got the poles out, then it's a bit of a faff to put them away. So I'll end up just walking a bit more than I would normally. So I might end up walking things when I would normally be running. So I definitely recommend trying it out and thinking, okay, at this sort of gradient of slope, I'm going to be quicker running, or I'm going to be quicker hiking with poles, but practice with it.
Great. Well, as we've hit 8:30 now, a little longer than we planned, but it's all been amazing stuff. I just want to give a big thank you to John at Las Fortiva for helping with his setup of this evening, and Kim, of course, and Rachel. If you can all put a little round of applause in the chat box or whatever you can do on this screen, that would be great. And do check out our future events at Run and Become. We have an ongoing schedule of events. I've got an idea that we might get Kim and Rachel back to do a similar one for the winter on winter skills, which is a totally different set of things. And Kim and Rachel can tell us about their winter adventures on the trails. Yeah. So thanks, everybody. A lot of comments coming in now. Thank you very much. Yes. We'll look forward to seeing you at another event soon. In the meantime, whether you're just starting out or whether you're planning 100 mile of the summer, just remember it's all part of the journey, and just enjoy the journey while you're out there. Okay. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.